All right. Topic 3 of the show comes from our boy on Patreon. His name is Robert Gonzalez. Thank you so much.
What up, Robert Gonzalez?
For supporting the show. Hey guys, I was wanting to know which superhero games do you prefer? The Infamous games or the Batman Arkham games, and why? And do you think Sucker Punch will make another Infamous game? And do you think there'll be more Arkham games?
Wow. Lots of questions.
Yep.
I like it. I like the topic. It's in my wheelhouse, as they say. I mean, knee-jerk reaction, first blush question, I'm going to say Infamous. I like those games more. And I love Batman. You know this. I Platinum Arkham Knight and obviously loved the hell out of every other Batman that there was. It's just that Infamous, I don't know. I like building something on new. You know what I mean? And I'm specifically talking about 1 and 2, by the way. Like, Second Son was fine. Really good gameplay. Nobody does the scaling up a building, running off, shooting powers, jumping down, that kind of open world gameplay better than Sucker Punch. They're amazing at making you feel awesome when you play their games. But Infamous 1 and 2, I loved this is brand new, you don't know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? Like that was my biggest complaint about Arkham Knight. Is like I'm playing a superhero game for a superhero story. You know what I mean? We're talking about like Metal Gear, right? And that's why one of the reasons Second Son didn't work for me, right? Of like, well, Delson kind of sucks, and what is going on? Like, you know what I mean? Like Augustine's cool, but what's Infamous 1 and 2 was I don't know. I literally don't know what's going to happen around to the next thing and what this means and making these choices, how they're going to play out. You know what I mean? Like I like that. I like the duality of am I going to be played as a good person? Am I going to be bad? Do I want to switch my choices here? How does it end? You know, like the Trish scenario in Infamous 1, if you're good or if you're bad and stuff like that. Whereas Batman, I feel like you know where you're going and what's going to happen and how it's usually going to play out. In Arkham Knight being the biggest example of that, of like how depressed I was when I figured out what was going to happen in Arkham Knight. I was just like, oh, really? All right, well, that's not as much fun. Colin, I'm sorry, you can chime in.
No, so nothing to be sorry about. I agree. I think Infamous plays better. I think that Sucker Punch's strength was... people have to remember when Infamous came out in 2009, this game was actually a pretty huge surprise.
Yeah.
Sucker Punch was known for making Sly Cooper games. Sony didn't even own that studio yet. Infamous came out after a gestation period that was pretty lengthy. I mean, it took them a while to make that game and get that game off the ground. And remember, too, that this was a game they had wanted to make since before they made Sly Cooper. So this was a game that they had on their minds for a long time. And the game came out. It did very well. Sony bought the studio. They made a sequel that was even better than the first one. And they really had great momentum going. And I agree with what Greg was saying that with the exception in my mind of Uncharted, Infamous is probably their PlayStation 3's best exclusive franchise. Like games that there were multiple games or whatever, because I don't want to, The Last of Us obviously is like really the cream of the crop. But
sure.
And I agree with Greg that Second Son was pretty disappointing. Not from a gameplay perspective, because as Greg noted, the traversal and the parkour and the combat in Infamous games is universally awesome. It's not something that they've fucked around with to the detriment of the game. The storytelling was a little weak. Delson, as Greg said, is a fucking awful character, and like who really cared about like what was going on in the game? Augustine, I agree. Augustine was a great villain, just wasted in that game.
And Fetch was great too, and that's why it was cool to get First Light. And it's like, well, I'll just make games about her. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So so in terms of gameplay, and I think gameplay is king, that those things matter. I would say the Arkham games, having played and beaten Arkham City, and then Arkham Asylum, and then quite a bit of Arkham City, and then all the way through Arkham Knight. I never played Arkham Origins. Arkham nails, especially Arkham Knight, I think nails aesthetic. I think it nails story. I think it nails voice acting. I think it nails all of those things like almost better than anyone.
I'd probably give combat to the Arkham games.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, because I was going to say, I think the combat in Arkham games is boring, and it's like what I look forward to least. Like, I think traversal and all that kind of stuff is just wonky.
Traversal, I'm not talking about traversal. Traversal, heads and shoulders, Infamous, shooting up poles, doing all this stuff, climbing up the wall. Just the fact that you can scale any wall you see. But, like, for me, at least, in the Infamous 1 and 2, I don't know how you feel. Like, combat always came down to this, and then just, like, sliding around people and trying to shoot them in the head. Whereas Batman, yeah, it's what do you call it, repetitive? I'm sorry. I lost the thing. Batman is the same thing over and over again, right? But it is that I feel like fucking Batman when I do it. You know what I mean? I feel powerful. I feel like a superhero.
Yeah, the thing that bothers me about Batman games, specifically Knight, which I think did it quite definitively, is it locks you. I don't like these arbitrary arenas. Like, I don't like when you encounter enemies and it's like, all right, now we're going to fight these enemies. Like, here. It's like, what I loved about Infamous was like, I don't have to fight these guys at all. And like, I can fight more of them. I can drag these two groups together and
blow them all up.
Do whatever you like. I felt like there was a lot of, we used the word earlier, there's a lot of agency in the way you fight in Infamous. And also Infamous has 2 different ways to play the game. Like, really, like you're good and you're bad and you're gonna get different powers and
different stories,
and
different endings,
stories.
You know what I mean?
So I think it was surprising that they didn't do more with Second Son. I think the game's very pretty, and it runs well, and especially the neon power I think is great. The video power is great. I like how they have unorthodox powers. It was like neon video and concrete and stuff like that. Like I liked that was
Smoke.
I thought it was interesting. It's not like ice and fire like they used before. It's like things that you would never think of. I thought that was really, really nifty.
Right.
But
The one thing I'd love to see, I mean, and when we're talking about comparing these two things that Infamous didn't get in 1 and 2, and I really thought they were going to get it in Second Son and didn't, that Batman nails, is weaving it all together and making it feel natural. Like, for Infamous 1 and 2, when they were basically like open world superhero game, they were kind of like making it. That was like their shit, right? Of like, you're on the map and you're going and you see like the camera icon pointing down of like, oh, there's a camera mission there. I was like, okay, cool, and that's fun and that's great, but it was like reminding that you're in a game and this, that, and the other. Whereas in Second Son, they did it again, and I was like, all right, this is Seattle. It's a super beautiful city. It looks photorealistic. Why would there still be this like thing pointing down? Whereas in Batman, right, like, you shoot up the side of the building and fucking Man-Bat roars in your face. Or you're going and you hear the opera music and you have to go find that. And then swinging it all around, the Riddler trophies, the way it's all one world. It didn't feel like segmented parts that were pasted onto the world.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean the brilliant. It's the same thing I think with Assassin's Creed, which I just don't like. Where it's if you could just take that world, that Assassin's Creed world, or that Arkham Knight world, and those characters and the storytelling and stuff, and just give it better gameplay, then the game to me would have been way better. So I think Second Son beats Arkham Knight hands down in gameplay, but I think Arkham Knight beats it in every other way. You know, like I and that's not really. I think that Infamous has set a very high bar for gameplay, so I don't think it's really an insult to Arkham Knight. I liked playing Arkham Knight; I thought it was fun, but I was more impressed with its production value than anything else. I think the combat is the same. It's just I found I disagree in the sense that I found the combat stilted and arbitrary. You know, like I really did. It's just like punch, 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 punch. This guy has a shield. Punch, punch, jump, punch. This guy has, a lightning thing. Hit him with your quick attack and then punch him. Like it's just like it's the same thing over and over again. I was just like,
but there's something about the look of it though. Like just watching the combat of Batman. Even if both games really just combat in games usually like those type of third person games,
Regardless, it's going to get
pretty repetitive and just like there's a bunch of guys do the same move that affects them the most,
Yeah.
But like watching the Batman stuff, no matter how many times you see the animation, it looks slightly different. There's always like the camera's a little bit different, the way he does it, and, like just transitioning between the enemies and stuff. It looks so fluid. Whereas in Infamous, like doing the shit, it looks like a Stilton animation that like reminds you this is a video game.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I will remind you that Infamous's combat isn't predicated by its aesthetic, right? Like the reason you could just keep hitting the square button and you're just going to jump from enemy to enemy. It's just going to happen automatically in Batman. Like if you kill an enemy in Infamous, he's dead, and you can keep shooting in that direction, but it's not going to like automatically point to the next enemy. And what I liked about that was I'm reminded by the Gatling gun enemies that you meet like halfway through and then later in Arkham Knight, where you have to start attacking them and then you have to quick time them 4 times. Like they'll start to swing at you, and you have to kick, and you just kill them the same way every time. If that enemy was in Infamous, you would be able to kill him like in 10 different ways. And that's a good point. So I look at it through that lens where I just don't feel like there's a lot of choice in Batman. I don't think it's the fun part about Arkham Knight to me was the story and the characters. They did a really great job of putting that city together, and I thought it was fun to kind of traverse. And I always kind of dreaded the combat. I was just like, I like the combat in the same spirit as Arkham Asylum, where I'm sneaking around and like the Two-Face missions I think were awesome with like going to the banks and stuff. Yeah, so I like the strategic element, but once the element of surprise is lost, like it's just like Jesus Christ, it's Batman. Hey Batman! And they're looking around. But I thought
Batman over here.
But I did think there were cool elements in the game in Arkham Knight, which I don't think was in the other Batman games, which was like you can disable their guns, you can disable their healing packs, you can disable like all these things like using your special weapons and stuff. So I thought that was cool. It was last question: is Sucker Punch going to make another Infamous game? No. They are. If Shuei told us at E3 on our live show that he had already played a portion of their next game, which indicates to me that they had been working on this game for a while before Second Son probably even came out, and that it's not an Infamous game because there's just no way a studio. I was there. That studio's big. I mean, it's a big studio, but when I was there right before Infamous came out, it looked like all hands were on deck for Second Son, but it seems like they were working on something else the entire time. So my assumption is, based on their pedigree, it'll be a similar game, third person, open, just like Sly, just like Infamous, but it'll be something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what about Arkham?
Arkham is a big question, right? I they didn't. My whole prediction leading up, I guess spoilers for Arkham Knight, not really on a thing that didn't even happen. So whatever. I predicted forever, right, that like, oh, Superman's gonna show up in this game, and that'll set up the Justice League game or whatever, right? And that doesn't happen. However, a million references to Superman, phone calls from Lex, Daily Planet things, Keystone City things. I mean, there's like they're making references to, hey, guess what? There is the DC universe here. This is happening, and so I still think a Justice League game isn't out of the question in terms of like the next game is, and this I won't spoil it, but I think the way the game, Batman Arkham Knight ends could leave itself open to a Justice League game of like, all right, cool, now we all come together to do this one thing and figure out what's happening.
Yeah, I think you're probably right from Rocksteady's point of view. I think that I'm surprised. I think there's 100% gonna be another Arkham game. You know, like they have this engine, and they're just gonna give it to another studio and just be like, here you go. You know, like make your
Montreal.
make your origins and. Yeah, like I think they'd be foolish not to do that. You know, in the meantime, like let Rocksteady like really marinate and give Montreal or another WB studio a chance to make their own Batman game. That seems to make the most commercial sense.
No, I agree. I still I think we're on the same page. Yeah, I was just talking about Rocksteady.
Awesome.